All right.
When she first got here, they told her that they weren't knit free. She was going around telling everybody, hey, and she thought it was like.
All right, come on in. You got a notes page in front of you. Pass that out to your quad. I will go as fast as you will let me today. All right. We got 3 concepts to drive through. I will go as fast as you will write, as fast as you will ready to learn. Respect that man. Some of them already got bullets in their face. They don't need to
What is everything?
know. No. All right, I amped you up. Now we had some fun. Now it's time to pay the dues. Time to let me talk to you for a little bit, and then hopefully we got time left over. We'll end it back on a high note. Okay. Pencils, are we ready? No one's gonna need to sharpen in the middle. What you need?
If you don't break it.
Huh? My goldfish. My kids goldfish, actually. I stole them. Pencils, are we ready? No. Papers, are we ready? No. Okay. Let's get away.
I'm seeing.
Hey. Good now?
Thank you for pointing that out.
Today's class, like I said, I know it's Friday. We had some fun. We got to take a step forward in our class. What do we call that? What's our surfboard analogy? Paddle hard. It's one of those days about paddle hard. These are 3 somewhat unlike concepts, but they do come together in the same era, and they all start with the letter I. So I call this class the 3 I's: Indians, Inventions, and Immigrants. Okay. Again, three concepts that maybe by themselves they stand alone. However, they do happen around the same era and in the same unit, of course. And since they all start with I, kind of like a good Baptist preacher, I'm making a sermon out of the 3 I's. Independence. So, Indians, Inventions, and Immigrants. I like that idea. Independence, because this is America. Now, Knox, remind me where we came from yesterday.
The West.
The West. Go West, young man. What went west? What was it?
Kanye did.
The what?
Kanye.
Yeah, no, not that west. Although I hope that helps you not forget it. Josiah, what did we build out west yesterday?
Oh yeah, the
Railroad. Josiah, the railroad. All right, we built the Transcontinental Railroad. We know that whose big idea was it to build the railroad?
Oh, it was mine. It was from here.
Oh, okay.
Wherever it went.
Paige is pointing out the way that we came together towards the middle.
It was California.
I don't mean the. Okay, I like what she's saying. Hang on. I like the energy. I don't mean Theodore Judah, the inventor. I mean, which is good that you remember that. I mean, what politician had the idea to build this railroad?
It was whoever I was, wasn't it? Lincoln.
This guy right here, he's in our room. Because, remember this, Lincoln is the great connector. Hey, Lincoln is the great connector. I know that we won't forget North and South. We fight the war North and South. But Lincoln is also seeking to connect East to West, which is a big piece of what we're going to be talking about today. Or rather, big piece of what we talked about yesterday, connecting East, connecting West. As we move out west, however, think about the name of the class. Who do you think that we encountered? Who do you think we stomped on a little bit? The name of the class is the Indians. So we are going to be talking about the Plains Indians and a series of wars that come about because of our departure out west. Now, your very first vocab word, and this is kind of it's a word by itself. I want you to write this down. We're in a period of rising U.S. infrastructure. The North winning the war based off of factories, based off of industry, kind of showed that this is the best way to advance in our country. Not to say agriculture is not important, but the importance of factories, the importance of rail, the importance of roads and waterways really showed that this is what we need in our country. We need to improve our infrastructure all around the country. And connecting this to yesterday's class, goods from the east need to move out west. People from the east need to move out and populate the west. So this rise in infrastructure allows westward expansion. It allows those in the west to find success. Because if we say, go out west and settle, but by the way, we don't know how we're going to get you any goods or supplies, would anyone go out west? Of course not. But if we say, go out west, and guess what? There's this link to all the commerce in the east. People are going to be like, all right, I'm more inclined to try that. So the rise in U.S. infrastructure, I hope you'll think about us as a nation under construction. And I like the two construction workers there saying, yes, we're a nation being built. This is all connected to the westward expansion. So that's just kind of one of your vocab words in isolation. Like I said, I'll go as fast as you'll let me today. I'm not going to try to weave together a whole bunch of extras. Up next, if you see it on your page, it is the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, of course, I mean that as a review, unless you weren't here yesterday. Maybe it's the first time you're hearing about it, but I see a couple pencils moving, so I'm giving us another second here.
What's the word after westward? I can't see it.
To thrive. Westward expansion to thrive.
Expansion.
Yeah, it allowed westward expansion to thrive. Of course, it's laid up on Google Classroom at the end of the day. I know that some of you check that, and I appreciate that. I believe that most of you probably don't, and that's okay. But if you ever need to check something, it is going to be on Google Classroom. Transcontinental Railroad, just another vocab word I need you to lay down. I know we did it yesterday, but I want you to write it again. The first railroad that was built to reach across the United States from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It allowed goods from the East Coast to make their way out west. It allowed people in the West to be more successful. So kind of everything I just said. Connects the railroad, or it connects the country. It facilitates the manifest destiny, right? If we're supposed to spread from sea to shining sea, but we haven't really controlled all the miles in between, can we really say we're spread from sea to shining sea? The Transcontinental Railroad gives us the ability to be connected from the East Coast to West Coast. It's one thing to claim the territory. It's another thing to really govern the territory or to have supplies that are able to get out to that territory. So as settlers go out west, they need to have supplies, and it's the Transcontinental Railroad that allows them to be more successful. Christian, that was a crash course of yesterday's class. But you didn't get to have Paige and Jack coming towards promontory point, reaching across and gingerly touching fingertips. I realize that is weirder for high schoolers to do than I anticipated.
Oh, that's not weird.
Yeah. I kiss my
All right, I think we're there. So this is that last review picture. Actually, I comboed all the graphics into one. You have Paige's Central Pacific starting in California. You have Jack's Union Pacific starting in Omaha, Nebraska, still labeled on my door here. They're working towards each other. They have motivations to build miles because they get paid per the mile. It was more difficult for Paige's group to cut through the mountains, and that slowed them down a little bit. Eventually, they meet in Utah. And Paige, do you remember the name of the point? Fancy word.
Promontory.
All right, Knox. All right, Paige, thanks. Promontory point. That's right. Promontory point. That's where the golden spike was driven into the ground and the railroad was formally connected. So there you have it. This is the Transcontinental Railroad. And Christian, like I said, that's your crash course on yesterday. Well, as Americans spread west, they did, this all happened at the expense of the Plains Indians. When I say the Plains Indians, I'm referring to several tribes, and I know that's your next vocab word. I'm going to show you a couple words here in a second. I want you to look at this picture and kind of be gripped by the collision of two cultures here. And what I want you to think about is what are those two cultures. So here's the picture. Look at it for a second. Just look at it for a second.
That's crazy.
Okay, so.
Lily, what's the collision of the two cultures here? What's one of the cultures? Lily, you guys are like all so anxious. I'm starting to call people. Well, what's one of the cultures? One of the two.
Oh, shit.
You need a phone a friend?
Just read the first.
Just decide, what's one of the cultures?
No, a Native American man.
Native Americans is one of the cultures, as that's a Native American man.
Four
Yeah.
words.
So what is the other culture then? What's the other culture?
He can do is gonna be.
So that's the first one. What's the other culture? The collision of cultures.
Oh, American.
Mia, say it.
American.
Yeah, the Americans. So you have, here's really ironic, listen to the words. You have the Native Americans, and of course that means they were there first. Then you have the white man Americans coming in and invading his land. And the power of the photograph is that the Native American man, he's wearing his native garb. He's wearing animal skins because that's what's normal for him. But he's looking at what used to be his land. However, the white man has invaded, cut a railroad right through it, damaged the natural landscape, probably gobbled up some natural resources, definitely interrupted the flow of the Native American lifestyle. And he's I feel like he's looking at this with regret or remorse or sadness, thinking about what once was a nice natural landscape, but now it's been invaded by this railroad. So a real collision of two cultures there, and it leads me to telling you more about the Plains Indians. So in this first little gap of gray, write down this slide right here, okay? The Plains Indians were a variety of tribes, but most notably the Sioux, Lakota, Comanche, and Apache. Interesting little side fact, to this day, the U.S. Army names its helicopters after these Indian tribes. There is a Comanche aircraft. There is a Lakota aircraft. There is an Apache aircraft. There is a Chinook helicopter. So very interesting that the U.S. Army, it does it as an honor, right? It does it to recognize the fierce warrior abilities of these Native American groups. These are the Native Americans who lived out west. I know we've said a lot of different tribes. We've walked the Trail of Tears, which is what the Cherokee walked on. When we say Plains Indians, these are the major tribes that we're referring to. And these are the tribes that were negatively impacted by the Transcontinental Railroad moving out west. And with the railroad comes people who start to encroach upon their lands as well. And the railroad companies, remember, one of the rewards for building was money. And that's obvious, money. But what was the other reward for every mile they built? What did they get?
2 miles to each side.
Land on either side. That's right, Paige. They got land. And I didn't say this yesterday, I'll say it now. If those 2 miles, if it was bad geography, or if it was like, a hillside or something like that, the company was given permission to claim acreage elsewhere in the area. So a lot of times it wasn't just the 2 miles on either side. They could have said, hey, I want that 400 acres right there. They got, these railroad companies, of course, run by white people, got a bunch of land from the Plains Indians. And then, the U.S. government just kind of broke treaty after treaty. They agreed. They originally said, hey, Plains Indians, you can live here. Just kidding. We're going to kick you out of your land. You can live here. Just kidding. We're going to kick you out of your land again. So there's a lot of distrust between the Indians and the white men. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know the estimated number, total of the Indians that have to be removed?
Quantity of Indians, I don't know. I'll say this though: the size of the land that was given to the railroads was about the size of Texas. Now, not a chunk of land like Texas, but when you count up all the railroads, both sides, and all the extra acreages, it was about 175 million acres, which is the size of Texas. Good question on the quantity of Indians, though. I'm not quite sure.
Was it
a lot?
Like those tribes? Were they all in the same area, or were they separated out and that's just?
They were kind of in a coalition, even though they had uniqueness for themselves. They were still kind of connected, almost like Georgia, Florida, Alabama were connected. So they were relatively spread out though. They were a people who they didn't live in neighborhoods. They didn't live in apartments.
That's just how far
they lived spread out on the land. Yeah, those are some good questions. Look,
Why couldn't they just stay there?
Why couldn't the Indians just stay there?
They couldn't share land.
Well, so one, the Indians were encroached upon. Okay, so there's no justification for that. But two, as they were encroached upon, they began to attack white settlers. White settlers respond by defending themselves, but now we're getting into fights with Indians. So I don't want to say that the Indians were wrong for attacking the settlers because they were defending their own land. But what you got is two groups at odds with each other. If everybody could have, let's just live together, maybe we would have avoided fighting. But that's not really human nature, right? Like if someone's going to come through your backyard, You gonna let them?
We'll pump.
Probably not.
Mr. Swanson,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think Josiah Smith for checkout, please.
Josiah Smith is on his way for checkout.
Classroom.
Thank you.
All right, so something else. Now, this is a question on your notes, okay? You don't need to write the whole slide. You can just simply answer the question. Something very important to Indian lifestyle was the buffalo. They used the buffalo in so many different assets of their life. They didn't just kill a buffalo and eat it for food. I mean, that's normal, right? You kill an animal, you eat it for food. So they certainly used it for food, but then they used its hide for clothing, or they would weave together several hides and use it as their home, right? The teepee that they would build was made out of buffalo hide. They would use the bone for tools. They could take a long femur bone or a leg bone and whittle it into a tool or a weapon. They would even use the tendon. They would use the tendons from the buffalo as string, or the sinew could become their bow cord, such like that. They used every single part of the buffalo. None of it went to waste. They also did not overhunt it. They knew that they could kill so many per season, but then they also wanted the herd to be healthy enough to continue to live, and they'd have buffalo for the next season, right? Now, the white man, on the other hand, as the white man, now listen, when I say that phrase, I stand here as a white man, okay? I know that there's some bad things that have happened across racial lines. So I'm just teaching you history. I mean, I'm standing here as a person who kind of fits into this category, right? When I say the white man. So I want everybody to know that. The white man, as he travels west, and he needs to cut path for the Transcontinental Railroad, when he encounters a buffalo herd and it's in his way, what's he going to do?
He gonna kill you.
Kill it, and how many of the buffalo is he going to kill? All of them. And what's he going to do with all those dead buffalo? Leave them to rot and die. Not use them in the way the Indians did. Do you know how many buffalo the white man killed building the Transcontinental Railroad? Almost all of them. Real talk, almost all of them. I don't have a number in my head. This is buffalo skulls. Look at the guy at the bottom. Let's say that he's 6 feet tall, right? My height. So the guy at the bottom is 6 feet. How high up is this mound of skulls? Probably 40 feet. Yeah. And who knows how wide. My point here is the white man decimated the buffalo herd. As he encroached out west, he decimated the buffalo herd, and that is literally taking away from the lifestyle of the Plains Indians. I think I showed you this quote yesterday, but I'll show you again. The iron horse threatens our existence. The white men are killing our bison, our primary food source and resource here on the plains. So you might think, oh, okay, they're killing the animals, right? Where's my animal rights activists? It was more than just animal rights things. It was more than just an animal rights thing. It was literally the lifestyle of the Indians. So it was a very big deal. And I saw some of y'all went slack jaw as I showed you this picture right here. So
That's not true. There's no way.
you think that's cap? You think that's not buffalo skull?
That looks small.
That looks small.
I mean, like Dave looks like.
Oh yeah, well, it's the skull. It's the skull of the buffalo. Now I'm calling no cap. I'm saying that this is true, and that's not even all the buffalo skulls. That's representative of how many buffalo they died. So what you have now is two people groups in conflict. You have the white man and the Native American in conflict with each other. The white man wants to build. The white man wants to take over natural resources. The Indian just wants to be left alone, and he wants the white man to quit killing his buffalo. So what we have definitely is conflict. Conflict is going to ultimately lead to wars with the U.S. Army. So I said it before, I'll say it again. Many different treaties were signed. Hey, you can live here. Just kidding. We broke that treaty. Hey, you can live here. Just kidding. We broke that treaty. Hey, for real though, you can live here. Just kidding, we broke that treaty. I mean, there's a history behind all of these treaties, but suffice it to say, many treaties were signed and broken. So the Indians naturally are not going to trust the U.S. government all that much anymore. Leads to numerous conflicts between the Indians and officially the United States Army. As a member of the Army today, this is not one of our finer moments, right? I've told you how certain pieces of history make me not proud to be in the Army or to be an American. This is one of them. I'm not very proud that the Army went to battle with Native Americans like they were an enemy. It is one thing to fight someone like Hitler, right? Let's go to war against Hitler. It is another thing to fight innocent people on our own territory, and I'm not super proud of that. All right, it does lead to a couple of battles, and you see that in the Plains Indians Wars, I got 2 battles. So I want you to write this about Little Bighorn. I summarized it for you. I want you to write this under Little Bighorn. The two commanders are Sitting Bull, that's Sitting Bull the Indian, he's a Sioux Indian, and Custer of the U.S. Army, General George Armstrong Custer. It's actually Lieutenant Colonel. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. You can just write it like that. Little Bighorn, or the Battle of Little Bighorn. Here's a summary. The U.S. Army was attempting to displace the Sioux, and the Sioux resisted. They did not want to be displaced from their home. Well, it all comes to a head June 25th, 1876. Custer and his small force. Here's where Custer went wrong. He had a very small force. Knox, how big was this force?
It was small.
It was small. He had a very small force. He entered Sioux territory, and here's where he miscalculated. The Sioux had a very large force. Knox, how big was their force?
It was big.
It was big.
Massive.
Custer had 200 men. The Sioux
I
had
think it was
3,000.
too big, actually.
No, for real. The Custer had 200 men. The Sioux had 3,000. Who do you think's going to win this fight? The Indians. Custer had, let me say it again. I know we're being a little silly. Custer had 200 men. The Sioux had 3,000. Akeem, who's going to win this fight?
The boy, 3,000.
The boys with 3,000, that's right. So Custer, he has an ego. Custer thinks that he can win everything. Custer has survived the Civil War. Custer has fought the Indians before. He thinks, my boys got this. I'm the commander. I got the greatest army force in the world. Let's go. Well, 200 is not going to beat 3,000. It's just not in a conventional war. The Sioux counterattack. Okay, Custer attacks. He starts the fight, but he can't finish it. The Sioux counterattack, and guess how many survivors there are? How many survivors are there? No survivors. There's no survivors. All 200 of Custer's army soldiers dead. Do this, Akeem. Dead. Dead. All 200 of Custer's men are dead. So, greatest miscalculation probably in military history. He thinks he can win, when in fact he doesn't. He can't win, and he doesn't win. And yeah, it is kind of crazy. So this is the Battle of Little Bighorn. Now, does anybody know there's another nickname for this battle? Anybody? AKA, a lot of times it's called Custer's Last Stand, because he was the last time he ever stood up. I'm sorry, that's not funny. It was Custer's last battle. Here is, I see some of y'all still writing, so I'm trying to go slow enough. Before I move on to my next picture, I'm trying to go slow enough. A lot of times it's called Custer's Last Stand, and it is seen as something that's going to increase tensions between the Army and the Indians. Now, Custer's group got massacred, but other Army forces are in the area. As soon as they hear of this, and it actually took a while because there were not any survivors to go and tell the story.
Wait, so did he not fight?
He fought and died. Yeah.
Oh, he died.
Custer was one of the last to die. Yeah, he fought and died. When the Army hears about this, and I was saying it took a little while because there was no one to go and tell them that, hey, we just got massacred. When the Army finally hears about this, they start pursuing the Sioux. This time they're not going to make a mistake by sending too few troops. So they send a lot of troops to fight the Sioux. The Sioux escaped north of Canada. They escaped into Canada, but you know what? They're not really suited for Canada. Canada is colder. Canada doesn't have the same farming that they're used to being able to do. So the Sioux hang out in Canada for about 5 years until they come back. They come back kind of like hat in hand, almost like a defeated people. And they say, okay, listen, we're back, we surrender, and we'll go to a reservation. So it's a really sad story that they basically got chased into a reservation. Even though they win one battle, the Sioux end up on a reservation. And America would say, ha, we got what we wanted. But on the other side of history, now we could be like, that's really sad that we put these Sioux into a reservation when it was their own land to begin with. All right, I'm gonna move on because I think that most of y'all done writing. Anybody want to know where Custer went to college?
Oh, yeah, what?
George Armstrong Custer went to West Point, class of 1861. He was ranked dead last in his class. So we might have seen this one coming based
What were you
on.
ranked?
I was ranked dead middle of my class. I mean, dead middle. I was 555 out of 1,010. So I was dead middle in my class. No, I was 505 out of 1,010. Dead middle in my class. Anyhow, Custer was ranked dead last in his class. He fought in the Civil War. I think I showed you this picture last week. Do you remember this picture? You remember what's going on in this picture?
You ain't showing us.
I didn't show you this picture? Okay, fine. I'll tell you this picture now. In the blue, that's George Armstrong Custer, lieutenant, okay, before he got promoted into a higher rank. Sitting next to him, who would you guess that person is?
Benjamin Franklin.
Not true.
Grant. No.
The person next to him is wearing what color?
Right.
Gray. So what side of the war was he on? He's a Southerner. Yeah, so blue is Union, gray is South. We got to get that right. Blue is Union, gray is South. So the guy sitting next to him was his roommate at West Point. For 4 years, they were roomies. In the war, they went different directions. And what happens here is that his roommate just lost a battle. His roommate got captured as a prisoner. But in the prisoner of war holding area, Custer is like, hey, buddy, what's up? And they saw each other, and they stopped and took a picture with each other. Now, he's a prisoner. Okay, the guy in gray is a prisoner right there. But it just shows you how the war split families and it split friendships. So really interesting. They went to school together for 4 years, but then they kind of got split during the war. So that was a little extra. Custer goes to West Point. Here's a picture of the chaos. Remember, 200 U.S. Army, 3,000 Sioux. This is a picture of Custer's last stand, and it shows the natives to be savage, right? It's like shooting right in the face. It shows the natives to be savage. This picture right here shows Custer to be really heroic. We don't exactly know how he died. It was probably too chaotic on the battlefield for anyone to know who really shot Custer. But we, like newspapers, wanted to show Custer as heroic, wanted to show the Indians kind of as savages. So that's another little piece of it, is that the white man is always the good man, and the Indian is always the savage. I'm not saying that's the way it should be. I'm saying that's the way it was. One more thing here. So I said, the Sioux were chased down by the Army. They were driven into Canada. After 5 years of struggling in Canada, they come back, and they agreed to settle on a reservation. I think that's really sad, right? They gave up, basically. They agreed to settle on a reservation. All right, next one is Wounded Knee, and I want you to write 1 and 2. All right, I want you to write bullet point number 1 and 2. That's a fair summary of Wounded Knee. Wounded Knee is the last battle in the conflict between the Army and the Plains Indians. Unfortunately, it's going to bring a conclusion to the fighting because the Indians are basically going to give up. They're going to be so tired of fighting the white man that they just give up. Here's what happens. After the Sioux came back, okay, they went to the reservations. There's this religious movement called the Ghost Dance religious movement. And here's what's hard to understand. It's probably not something you're familiar with because around here we aren't doing a lot of ghost dances. But the Ghost Dance religious movement, part of it was that you would do a very particular dance to the gods. And I don't want to get into any stereotypes, but it kind of involves the Indians bouncing around and they make that noise with their mouth. That's kind of stereotypical. I'm not, hey, it's part of their religious movement, okay? So it's a real thing to them. I'm not getting into those stereotypes. Well, the U.S. Army was observing them from afar. They were kind of letting them be for the time being, but they saw that they were growing in their strength. So during one of these ghost dance religious services, the Army walks right on in. Imagine being at your church on Sunday morning, okay, worshiping the way you do, whatever that is, and the Army walks right on in and tells you to stop. How would you feel? This America, freedom of religion, right? Don't we believe that? Freedom of religion? Well, check it out. The U.S. Army walked right up to them, demanded that they stop their religious service, and tried to start confiscating guns. Why would the Army want to confiscate guns?
So they can't fight.
So that they don't have the ability to fight back, right? Should you be careful of anyone who wants to take away your guns?
Yeah.
Probably is all I'm going to say about that. Well, so they start confiscating their weapons. From somewhere, and nobody is quite sure, a shot rings out from the distance. What does that sound a whole lot like?
For Sumter.
Fort Sumter. How about the start of the other war we've talked about? Lexington.
I was trying to say
Shot heard around the world.
Yeah.
How about, you remember the Boston Massacre? A shot came from who knows where? Well, either way, so I hope you kind of remember those, right? Boston Massacre, Lexington, which was the shot heard around the world. How about this for a theme? When a shot comes out amidst some tensions, what follows?
fire.
A lot of shots. Yeah, so it doesn't matter who fired the first shot. What happens next is a full-on battle. Full-on, well, really a massacre. So the Indians really didn't have much of a chance. They did not have as many firearms as the Army. They were not set up for a fight like the soldiers were already set up for a fight. So whoever fired this first shot really turned it on, and the Army massacres the Sioux. The massacre is heightened by one other thing. Now, this is going to be, some of you are going to like, give me the stake eye on this one. Some of the Indians believed that they had on what they knew as a ghost shirt. And they believed that their ghost shirt was basically a bulletproof shirt. So they charged right at the soldiers, believing that they were going to be impenetrable, believing that they're going to be protected.
Yeah, they died.
Now, I don't know what you believe about ghost shirts, but suffice it to say, their shirts were not bulletproof. And this even contributed to the massacre even more. In the end, 300 Sioux were massacred on the field that day, women and children. So it wasn't just warrior on warrior, it was also women and children who died on the field that day. This is not a sketch. This is not a painting. This is a real picture of bodies being left on the field. There were so many dead that they couldn't even bury them very quickly. So this is a picture from days later with still bodies on the field. After Wounded Knee, it is largely regarded as a tragedy, but it's also regarded as the Indians giving up. After Wounded Knee, there was no more resistance to white settlers. This is a really sad part of the story because the Indians basically said, we're tired and we quit. We'll go to the reservation. White man, you win. I think it's a really sad part of the story because they lost their lifestyle. They went to the reservation after being bullied into submission. And either way, however you see it, it is the end of resistance to westward expansion. So, a lot of our story is tied up into that as well. And any questions on the Plains Indians and
If you have the list, Flamingo of 15, you're the winner at this time.
someone needs to go tell her number 2. When y'all see Miss Vicky today, you tell her number 2.
I got you.
No, wait. But I believe you got me. I believe Keith, this is a loyal guy right here. This man's loyal.
Everybody, yeah.
All right, that was Indians. Now let's move on to inventions. If you flip your page over, here's how we're going to do it. I've already got the name written down for you. You're going to write down the invention. You're going to write down the significance. Some of these you might already know about, but I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about each of them as well. So here's the inventors we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Samuel Morse, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, bonus Joseph Glidden, and the double bonus is going to be crazy old Maurice. You ever heard of him? I'm just kidding. This girl's like, we don't have Maurice on there. Samuel Morse. Jack, what did he invent? It's in his name.
Morse code. A horse.
He did invent Morse code, but the reason he invented Morse code is his other invention, which was what? Telegraph. Lily, tell me what is the telegraph? You know? No? You want to phone a friend?
Yeah.
Phone a friend. Who's it going to be?
Go phone because I
Telegraph.
Knows, obviously, I guess.
It's like,
I know
it's
people.
what did you say?
Okay, let's listen to Kalia. Say it again. It's how they communicated, but what was